Many homes in the United States today are suffering what some have termed the phantom, either because he is no longer living in the home for whatever reason, or perhaps because he's so absorbed with other things that he never actually had time to spend with his children or with his family. One of the names used to describe God in the Bible is Jehovah Shammah. It means the God who is there. We need fathers there, home, involved and engaged in the raising of their children. If you would be opening up your Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. Skip our mini-series on the Gospel of Mark and go to chapter 5. Well, today is Father's Day. And since it is, I wanted us to talk about a story that is for today. Jesus has been very popular. He is constantly large crowds, not just crowds, but huge crowds. And always depends on him for his time. Powerful people seeking an audience with Jesus. Admittedly, some are seeking an audience to try and do him some harm. Others, such as his case, the story we're going to look at today, aren't looking to do harm, but they need him. They need him to help them. And so today we're going to talk about a synagogue ruler named Jarius. This was a father who was always there for his daughter. If you would follow along as I read Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 24, and then we'll skip and read verses 35 through 43. Jesus had crossed the boat to the other side. A great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jarius by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet, implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." With him, a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. Down to verse 35. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue. Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them, "No one should know this." Something. Most of us with children can only imagine how Jarius must have felt. How he must have felt when his little girl, the apple of his eye, was dead. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you've experienced it yourself. For the most part, we just have to imagine how that must feel. But Jarius had something a little bit different. Jarius knew somewhere close by there was a man who could help him. He'd heard that he could help him. A man named Jesus. And so he thought, well, maybe I should go. But then he thought, maybe himself, but it's so risky. Risky opposition because it could cost me my job, my career, or worse, or more. But his daughter was dying. And because his daughter was dying, there was no risk too great, no price too high. And so he goes to see Jesus. I want to point out three things that Jarius' daughter saw in her father. Three things that our children should see in us as their grandfather, and so forth. First of all, saw that he was not ashamed to seek out Jesus. She was alive when he left. He may have told her, I'm going to get Jesus, and he's going to be able to. Notice something about Jarius is that Jarius came himself. He himself went to seek out Jesus. He didn't send a servant, though there would have been nothing wrong per se with this. He could have sent a servant so that he could have stayed at his daughter's side. Nothing wrong with it. Others took that route. In fact, in Luke chapter 7, about a centurion who took that route and sent servants to Jesus to heal his servant. In fact, that centurion is one of two people in the Gospels that Jesus said had faith. So there would have been nothing wrong with him sending a servant. He didn't. He went himself. Jesus. He didn't send his wife either, thereby abdicating this role to his wife. You know, many men do this today. You know why? Sick kids are for the to take care of, right? Just the way it's gonna be. It's got to be. The kids, when they cry, they want mommy. So you give them mommy, and there's no reason for involved when they're sick. Unfortunately, a lot of men feel the same way about church. Church is for women and children. Or maybe they come to church, but Bible class, that's for kids. That's for the women. I don't need that stuff. I don't need church. I don't need Bible study. A real man doesn't attend those things. Fathers, we must seek out Jesus personally for ourselves. We can't send somebody else to do it. We've got to do it ourselves. Responsibility is ours alone for us and our family. Ephesians 6 verse 4, Paul writes these words, do not provoke your children to anger. Bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. You want to know something that's very significant? These modern versions be gender neutral and everything and take away all of the specific, the quote-unquote denomination in the Bible. Even they have the word fathers as part of Ephesians 6 verse 4. Why is that? Because Paul is very specific. It's the father's responsibility to teach the children of the Lord. As such, we cannot turn it over to anybody else. We can't turn it over to the mothers. We can't turn it over to the grandparents. We can't turn it over even to the church. Men, you have no more important task than to bring your children to the Lord. Now, there are occasions man is not willing to do that. In those instances, the wife and the mother have to take over. Incidentally, I can run a commercial for tonight's sermon. We're going to talk about one of those situations. So you want to come tonight that lesson as well. But fathers, let your children know that you are not ashamed of the gospel, Romans 1:16. Let them know that you are not ashamed of God of the gospel. Lead them to God. Walk with them in God. Show them how to seek out Jesus in their own lives. I also want you to notice, not only did Jarius' daughter see that he was not ashamed to seek out Jesus, but he saw he was not ashamed to bring Christ to his home. Now this is big deal. Jesus in the home. And some of you might be thinking, well, why is it such a big deal? Well, why this was such a big deal for Jarius? To the crowds, Jesus was a great teacher. To the crowds, Jesus was a great miracle worker. To the crowds, Jesus was a great have in your home. That was to the crowds. To the uninformed crowds. To the crowds that were easily swayed by popularity and popular opinion. To the religious leaders, i.e., Jarius's is. Religious leaders, Jesus was a threat. Remember how we talked about last week how his teaching had authority, and he taught as one with authority, and not as the law, like Matthew 7:9 says, and like we read in Mark chapter 1 as well. The religious leaders, Jesus was a threat. The religious leaders, Jesus was a Sabbath violator, one who needed dealt with, Luke 6:11 tells us. The religious leaders, he was a friend of quote-unquote sinners. He was anointed by a sinful woman while he was at a Pharisee's house, Luke 7:36 and following. A Pharisee wasn't that a woman like that would even in his house, let alone one of his guests, and yet Jesus allowed the touch. Jesus was a sinner ruler. He was risking his position, bringing Jesus into Rome. Both of those Luke references, by the way, occur before chapter 8, which is where Luke records this in his gospel. Despite the risk to his position, it was the only way to make his daughter whole again. So, why is it such a big deal for us? Why would this be such a big deal for us? Well, look at Psalm 27, verse 1. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord builds the house. It doesn't matter how much that house costs. It doesn't matter who you get to approve of the way that you're building that house. Build it labor in vain. In Exodus chapter 2, we have the story of the first Passover. The angel of death coming. The day that the Israelites were to escape that fate was the blood of a lamb on their doorpost. Who was it, incidentally, that was supposed to see that was done? If you look at Exodus chapter 12, verse 3, where each man is to take a lamb for his family. It was the responsibility. What does that have to do with us, though? I mean, that's the Passover. Israelites in Egyptian bondage, led out of Egyptian bondage. What does that have to do with us today, first century? Well, there's an angel of death going through the United States. He's not physically harming or killing our children. Him spiritually. He's using quote-unquote harmless entertainment to get them to lower their guard and say, oh, it's just a movie. It's just a game. It's not that big a deal. All the while eroding away at their sin. He's using their friends to try and get them to choose between what their friends want them to do and what God wants them to do. He's using whatever or whoever we will allow him to use to influence and impact our children. No mistake about it. He is out to hurt our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. He is out to hurt them in the worst sort of way. If we do not apply the blood of Jesus for the lives of our families will die. Jesus must be found in our homes. More than that, He must be in a permanent place in our homes. Look at Mark chapter 5, verse 40. Or a little bit earlier. It arrives at the home and it says, he said, "Why are you making such a big deal? She's not dead, she's asleep." And we're told, and they laughed at him. Put them all outside, the child's father and mother, those who were with him, and went in where the child was. You know, if we need to notice He removed those who laughed when He said she was asleep. When you read through this, it sounds like He just wanted the people who didn't believe in Him to be out so that it wouldn't impact the believers. You look closer at it. What you see is that Jesus went into another person's home and He was the one who determined who went with Him to the child, who stayed away from the child. Jesus went into another person's home and took authority. Fathers, you're the head of your home. But who's the head of you? Christ should be. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 3 says that very thing. The head of man is Christ. So letting Him have the authority in your home. Are you letting Him who comes in and who and what stays out? So Jarius' daughter saw that he was not ashamed to seek Jesus out. Saw that he was not ashamed to put Jesus into their home. The third thing she saw is, well, it's more implied, stated directly, and that is that she saw he was not ashamed to express his love for her. He showed his love is very important. You might say, well, wait a second, it doesn't about his love for his daughter in here. Actually, I believe his love for his daughter is all over this passage. I mean, what motivated and moved him to act like he did? What motivated and moved him to leave his dying daughter's side to seek out a Jewish rabbi and then fall on his knees at that rabbi's feet, beg him to come and heal his daughter? What motivated him to get his place in society? Not care what other people thought about him, if it cost him his job. Not his love for his daughter, then what could possibly have been? You know, we don't know how much longer the girl lived. We don't. For the rest of her life, not a day went by that this girl didn't know how much Father loved her. There was not a day that she did not know that she was alive that day because of how much her Father loved her. So, dads, how do we show our love? Well, we show it by giving the child everything they want, everything they ask for. Trying to be their buddy rather than a friend. We don't by making sure they have a closet or a house full of toys, a closet and a dresser full of clothes that are the latest and greatest styles. Making sure that they have the latest and greatest phone so that they keep up with their friends and their friends don't have a phone than they do, and so forth. And so on. That's not the way we do it. But we sitting that child down, explaining we are Christians, serve Jesus. That there are certain things that I, as the parent, the father, will allow in our home. There are certain things that I, as the father or the parent, will not allow in the home. There are some things we will do, and there are some things that we will not do. may not always understand the decisions, because I want you to live. And we do it. We show it by being consistent in our example. Showing them that you want eternally together as a family with the Lord. By being consistent example, and not just saying, well, you need to get up and go to church, but I'm going to stay home and watch football. Or, there's an event, it's a Saturday, and there's an event going on at church, and, well, you all need to go, but I do that yard work. Or, I got to do this, that, the other, whatever. Consistent example. Jarius saw that her dad was not ashamed to seek out Jesus. He was not ashamed to bring Christ to his home, and he was not ashamed to show his love for dads. May we commit ourselves to that. Children will see that we are not ashamed to seek out Jesus for ourselves. We are not ashamed to bring Christ into our homes. We are not ashamed to show our love for our children. See, the leader of your home, allowing Christ to lead you, allowing Christ Lord real. Being a Lord is being our leader. Are you allowing Him to be the one who has ultimate control over everything that you do? That's just for the men, that's for everybody. If Jesus is your Lord, He's going to determine what you do. He's not your Lord. Maybe you take that initial step of making Him your Lord, being immersed in the waters of baptism this morning for the forgiveness of your sins. There is no greater pleasure to give to your earthly father. There certainly is no greater pleasure you can give than your heavenly Father the gift of today. Perhaps you haven't lived up to what you're supposed to be doing if He is your Lord, letting Him calls on built and easy calls in your life. Maybe you need to repent. Maybe where you're at. Maybe you do so. Whatever the case is, don't leave here without making that response. If we can help you in some way, public response, we'll come to the front now as we stand and sing together.